A recent public poll shows 6 out of 10 South Koreans approve of President Lee Jae Myung's handling of state affairs. We have more press perspective today. Hope your work week is off to a good start. You're watching Press Perspective for this Monday, June 30th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. A new administration is at the top office and a sense of relative stability appears to have taken shape here in the nation. For more on this, I have Steven Borowiec with Japanese weekly news magazine Nikkei Asia here in the studio. Steven, as always, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
I also have Chloe Borgnon with French broadcaster France 24 with us. Chloe, it's great to have you here.
Hello, it's nice to be here.
Steven, we will start with you. Now, as I mentioned earlier at the clip, during the clip that is, 64% of the people here in South Korea approve of President Lee Ja Myung's handling of state affairs. What factors do you suppose are fueling this favorable finding?
Well, if you look at the data, this is a Gallup poll that did have some information on like what people would cite as their reason for giving a favorable assessment, and among those, the economy and Min Sunhee, which I think is usually rendered as people's livelihoods, was the most common response. And that was followed by a positive assessments of the speed at which Lee Jae Myung was undertaking his governance, and then following that was sotong, or a communication, the idea that he's like carved out a presence as a communicative president. I think we could point to a few things. I mean, number one, it's just important to note that like customarily, leaders, not just in South Korea, but all over the world, have high approval ratings when they enter office. I think Lee kind of has the advantage of he replaced a very unpopular administration. So like he does seem kind of good in comparison, but like just comparing his number, he's at 64. I mean, Moon Jae-in, when he became president, was at 84%, but President Yoon was at only 52%. So we can make of those numbers what we will, but I think Lee has gotten some high marks because I would just mention two things. In terms of foreign policy, he's kind of hit every point, all the big important countries, and he kind of did them in a very logical order. Like he spoke with the U.S., he spoke with China, he spoke with Japan. He struck to what some observers thought was a surprisingly friendly or conciliatory tone with Japan. And he's this week he's spoken to leaders in Southeast Asia and other places. So I think he's demonstrated that he's kind of has his priorities in a logical sequence, and he's tackling things in a reasonable way. And then domestically, he's been a big proponent of this like extra budget stimulus spending. He gave a speech on Thursday at the National Assembly where he outlined his priorities there, and he talked about the need to assist vulnerable groups, the need to support fledgling industries such as artificial intelligence. That's something that he's made a big deal of. I think it's important to note that in South Korea, we call this a divided country a lot, but there is a lot of consensus on a lot of important issues. And I would say that there is a strong consensus among South Korean political parties and the South Korean public that the state ought to play an active role in supporting businesses. The state ought to play an active role in supporting vulnerable parts of the economy, such as small business owners, working families, lower income people. And so far, I think Lee has been quite wise in that he's directed his efforts towards things that are like not super controversial, towards things that like there's a kind of critical mass of people who agree that these are like wise things for the South Korean administration to do. Throughout his campaign, he made a lot of quite obvious moves to like go into the political center. You know, he said that he was not going to govern as a particularly left-wing sort of guy. He was kind of a middle of the road or maybe even conservative. And another big part of his appeal was that he was going to bring calm, he was going to bring order to the country, and he was going to heal divisions. And at least so far, he seems to be following through on those things.
Right. And against this backdrop, Chloe, The Economist had recently published an article about the prospects of the new Lee Ja Myung administration putting South Korea back on track. Could you tell us a bit about this coverage and also your own observations here?
Yeah, sure. So in this article, what The Economist is saying is, until recently, South Korea was moving up the chain in the, let's say, global order of the countries, depending on different, obviously, rankings and different elements. But they were saying that it was a country doing well compared to their bigger neighbors. So it was more freedom, the economy was doing well, the soft power was doing well. But what they are saying in the Economist article is that the martial law came to question this progress. And it's true, like, it has been said quite a lot in the different foreign medias, was like, is Korean democracy strong enough? So we've seen that it was, and I mean, obviously now looking at it back with all the things that happened in the last months, we can say that, yeah, it was strong enough and doing well enough, but at that time there was that question, the question of the stability of the economy as well. There were also some questioning about what would be the foreign policy, or if, you know, that's what we spoke about when Lee Jae Myung arrived at the presidency, was they need to show that South Korea is a trustworthy partner in a lot of elements, and that's what was the Economist was saying. They also have been quoting Lee Jae Myung when he was in campaign, so not elected yet, and he was saying that our national prestige has fallen. So that's kind of the point that they were making, and they are saying now that there are three main industries that could help South Korea, you know, kind of go back on tracks. So the first one will be culture, with the Hallyu wave, obviously, the very strong soft power machine of South Korea. They are saying that membership in fan communities that are linked to Hallyu wave in general, so K-pop, K-drama, would be also the food, everything linked to that Hallyu wave has been growing up. It was under 10 million people in 2012. And it's gone up to 225 million people in 2023. So, I mean, it's kind of a very strong point. And we know that we've been speaking about the fact that Blackpink is coming back, BTS is coming back probably. So we know that the industry is going to start again. And it's also one of the pledges of Lee Jae Myung as a president. He said that he wants more support from the government for the creation and distribution of K content, like K culture content. The other thing will be technology. So South Korea is doing well in the memory chips. It's obviously something that's quite important with artificial intelligence developing. So it's important for South Korea to stay there. Biggest competition is Taiwan. But again, Lee Jae Myung has been saying that he wants to have a public-private fund to continue developing this sector specifically in South Korea, because this is one of the points where if South Korea lose the competition now, it will be hard to get back on tracks. While if they are able to stay up to date and stronger in the technology, they will be able to show through that technology that they are very strong in technology and industry. And the last one is the defense industry. And that's, for me, a point that I've not specifically thought about before, so it was interesting from this article from The Economist. They're saying that because of the threats posed by North Korea, industry in South Korea is at a high capacity. And so when everyone else, especially in Europe, the US, were showing up a bit of a slowdown in production because everything was going toward Ukraine in the Ukraine war, or the Russian war in Ukraine, South Korea was one of the top industries, and it's one of world top 10's arm exporters, actually. So this is another industry that we might not think about, but could be also a strong point for South Korea. But there is still some risk, obviously, and I feel the government, the current government, has to take care of that as well. There's obviously polarization in the, inside South Korea that has to be taken care of. And then there might be some trouble in the more global geopolitical state. We know that the US might ask South Korea to choose between United States or China as the main partner. There was also, domestically, the question of the fertility rate still starting to slowly go up, but it's still not enough. So there's also a slowing of the growth rate. So that all of that are questions that have to be tackled down now to be sure that South Korea can still be on track and going up again, as it has been doing for the last years.
Right, and all this within the coverage by The Economist recently. Steven, President Lee Ja Myung's cabinet nominations have been making quite a bit of headlines. Now, that being said, could you tell us a bit about his Labour minister nominee, and what are the broader implications of this nomination, do you think?
Well, the significance of it, as it seems now, is that this appears to be the first, if he is confirmed to be the first Labour minister who was actual working blue-collar guy. There's a really interesting story circulating in the media now about how Kimyong Hun was at his job as a train driver when this news came in, and because he was focused on his work, he didn't have his phone with him, and he wrapped up work for the day, and it wasn't until like an hour later that he learned that he had been nominated for this position. The labor movement for a very long time has had this kind of tension over like, should the leadership positions as concerns labor, should they be filled by workers themselves, or should they be filled by people who have more academic or managerial credentials? And so South Korean labor ministers have customarily been people who were, had backgrounds in business or who are academic experts or a number of other things. But this is the first time that we have someone who has, the most recent possible direct on-the-job experience. But he also has a quite long and quite decorated career within the labor movement. He was the leader of KCTU, the quite very militant and very big and kind of influential umbrella group. He was the leader of that organization from 2010 through 2012. And he has so far, he hasn't said all that much, but he's pushed, he's indicated that he would push for some of these more kind of contentious things that like workers in management don't really agree on, one of which is the Noran Bongtubop, how do you say that in English? The yellow envelope law, which is a quite contentious piece of potential legislation. We don't have time to go into all the details of it, but like one big important aspect of it is that the workers want this because they see it as potential protection for if a company tries to sue them for causing losses during a strike. Management is opposed to it because they feel like it will incentivize strikes and it will lead to gridlock in the economy as workers go off the job. They feel like they'll be able to go off the job on a kind of weaker premise, and it could lead to the profusion of illegal strikes. This all remains to be seen, but I think it probably says something about Lee's judgments and like Lee's predilections, that he would be the first president to appoint somebody like this. Lee himself comes from a kind of unconventional background. He's not somebody who attended an elite university. He's not somebody who comes from an elite or influential family. He's a very kind of a humble origins sort of guy. But just personally, as somebody who writes a lot about labor, I'm interested to see what he'll do. And I just hope, as someone who lives in this country, I hope that he'll find solutions to the like very old and very lingering problems in the workforce here. One thing that he said that I thought was kind of refreshing was he just mentioned that the solution to what ails the South Korean economy right now is contrary to what some people say, is not to work more hours. We see that sometimes in the kind of upper reaches of the bigger companies, that when there's a downturn, they say, okay, now everybody has to come in on Saturday. Everybody has to stay late. Everybody just, work. We can't be too dismissive of that. That kind of very spirited dedication to expending effort is a big factor in what brought Korea to become the wealthy and successful country that it is today. But hopefully Kim can put together an administration that will find smarter and more effective solutions that can satisfy workers and their families and management. And because that's ultimately what will guarantee a safer and more prosperous future.
My fingers crossed for that, Stephen, of course. Moving forward, the South Korean leader, Chloe, did not attend this year's NATO summit over in the Netherlands last week. A number of foreign media outlets have included the thoughts of many pundits who appear to be siding with his decision to sit out the NATO summit this year. Could you explain their stance for us? And again, could you also include your thoughts regarding that?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, the official reason that was given, and it's quite an important thing from the Lee Jae Myung staff for not going to NATO, was that there were domestic affairs that were the emergency, and there were no time to go to NATO because South Korea was one of the invited guest countries. So the two main points that were kind of shown by the foreign press as the positive points shown by pundits. The first thing was strategic patience. So that's the diplomat who made an article about it, saying that actually it was quite a smart move because the current geopolitical situation is a quickly evolving one. Let's remember that NATO happened last week. The ceasefire between Iran and Israel was just being set in place, so the war between the two countries was still on. There's also obviously still the war in Ukraine. So it was a good idea, could be a good idea to just wait and see and avoid going into a meeting where in the end there would be strong words to be done. They could have been, we could not know beforehand what was going to be the final statement from all the members of a year. So that was probably a good idea not to go into what could have become a diplomatic trap in the end. And there's also the idea that we know that Donald Trump is really into transactional diplomacy. So that could also have been part of a trap kind of way to say that he would have been able to maybe get South Korea to sign things and not have the freedom of movement that requires it to be for the transaction and for the first one-on-one meeting between the two leaders. There was also, for example, South China Morning Post, they spoke about pragmatism. We know that's what Lee Jae Myung has been putting up since he's president. He's been speaking about pragmatic diplomacy. And so that's what was also referred to as the most positive notes on the choice of not going to NATO. Some experts say that it could have signaled also too strongly a position that would be pro-US or pro-Western countries if you had gone to NATO directly while all the situation was in a kind of a turmoil. And if you had my thoughts on it, I do agree mostly on the idea of strategic patience. It's true that last week was kind of, everything was still boiling up in the Middle East, was kind of hard to know in advance. So that would have meant that Lee Jae Myung as a president would have gone there without being fully prepared because no one could know exactly what was going to happen between Iran and Israel at that moment. There's also the idea, like some people have been criticizing this choice because they were saying that was the opportunity to meet with Donald Trump and speak about tariffs. But the truth is Donald Trump's attention was not on tariffs anyway. So even meeting with him would probably not have gotten South Korea further into the negotiation on the tariff war that's currently going on. And lastly, for me, was a smart choice also in a political way because President Lee Jae Myung has been elected to appease South Korea after the political turmoil that we've seen in the recent months. And domestic affairs are his priority. And it's true that when we were speaking with people, when we were covering after the election, the first things that people who voted for him were speaking about was domestic affairs, the local economy, not geopolitical stance. So I think that was probably a smart move there to choose to put the local affairs first, domestic affairs first.
Right, for sure, domestic interests at the forefront then. Steven, earlier on, Chloe touched upon the article by The Economist that highlighted the three engines of economic growth going forward. They included, of course, culture, technology, and defense. That being said, the national interest, Steven, recently covered Poland's, and I'm quoting, love for South Korea's advanced K2 tanks. Could you tell us a bit more about our K2 tanks and about this love? And what makes this so important for South Korea, do you think?
Well, I don't know if I can quite speak to the origins of this love. I mean, I'm not directly involved, but I think, Chloe laid out some of this earlier in that, let's call it satisfaction. Customer satisfaction in Eastern Europe is rooted in a few things as pertains to these K2 MBTs and other howitzers. And South Korean companies have supplied Poland with a lot of different munitions over the past few years as Poland is a country that borders Russia, is quite close to Ukraine, and kind of has similar apprehensions over the prospect of an expansion-minded Moscow. So there's a real kind of overlap of wants. As Chloe mentioned, South Korea has for many decades had this quite effective production capacity for when it comes to weapons. And for a very long time, it was focused on allowing the country to meet its own domestic security needs as pertains to deterring North Korea and supplying its own quite large standing army. But in recent years, it has become more and more of a kind of international commercial opportunity. And as the South Korean Defense Acquisition Program has partnered with companies such as Hyundai Rotem and Hanwha and a few others to kind of fill this gap in the international geopolitical scene, and they've been able to distinguish themselves with quite quick speed of delivery and just strong reliability, and being able to supply partners with Poland with these quite effective and quite cost manageable, not more expensive than the similar products offered by German or American or producers in other countries. So this is the next phase of that. I mean, if I had been at the NATO summit, I mean, like one area of reporting that I would have been really keen to do is one thing that's worked in South Koreans' favor is that South Korea is a U.S. ally, so it produces all of this stuff that is compatible with U.S. standards, and NATO countries have similar standards where all of their the things that they use are interoperable, I think is the military term. So as Trump moves away from Europe, and as Trump continues to signal to Europe that he's like not really interested in multilateral platforms like NATO, do those countries in Europe then make other plans? Do they shift away from this kind of orientation, and does that then perhaps erode some of South Korea's attractiveness as a supplier? I don't know because I wasn't there, and it's a little bit early to tell. Things with how Trump interacts with Europe and how Trump orients his own policies seems to change pretty frequently. But South Korea, as we said, has this very well-established production capacity and this very clear desire to continue filling these kinds of gaps. So I think whatever happens, they will be able to adapt.
Right, hopefully. Chloe, one quick question before we end today. The president on this Monday afternoon sat down with renowned figures from the cultural arena, including soprano Cho Soo-mi and musical writer Park Chun-hyu of the Tony award-winning musical Maybe Happy Ending. All this being said, earlier you mentioned about the importance of culture with regard to Korea's economy. Squid Game Season 3 hit the screens last week, and according to Flix Patrol, it's an OTT ranking site, it hit #1 in 93 countries within a day of its release. But I hear the response to the season itself is quite mixed. Could you tell us more?
Yeah, sure. So it's true that the responses were kind of mixed. So some have said that it was really brilliant, even in the medias. I mean, you've seen some medias who were really happy with it, and some other, like the New York Times, that was kind of business as usual. The patterns are too repetitive. But as you said, it did quite well. I mean, it ranked #1 in 93 countries in just one day of its release. It's been like faster than season 1 and 2 to be claimed that spot. So it is quite impressive. Then it's true that I feel like even for season 2, that's also something we could have said. It's hard to recreate the excitement of the first season, because what really got Squid Game in the spotlight was that it was brand new, it was shocking, and even that success was not anticipated by Netflix at the time. So obviously, now people were expecting again the shock value. It's hard to bring it back to the audience.
All right. Well, I suppose we can come up with our own conclusions after watching it in full. Because I am on episode 5. I understand the two of you have yet to watch it.
Yeah.
All right. This weekend, maybe then.
It's in my queue.
All right. All right, Chloe, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Steven, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right. On that note, we end Monday's edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. Do join us again, same time tomorrow.